Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we talk about problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with a video.
I, a 27-year-old male, live with my sister, 19. Our parents died in a car crash 5 years ago, and I got custody of my sister because I was already an adult. It was one of the hardest times for us because I was so used to having our parents around and wasn't prepared for what happened. It would have been easier if they were sick and then died. At least I would have been prepared for the possibility, but they just went on a short trip one day and never came back. I had to be strong for my sister and man up. I didn't want anyone to take my sister away from me, so I did everything I could to keep her. I started working 2 jobs at first. One was online and the other on site. We moved out of our parents' house to a different place because it was too traumatic for us. I'm very protective of my sister, and nothing happens around her without my consent. I tried to be very relatable to her so that she could speak to me about anything, since I knew that I was her only parent figure and I had to be everything to her. Some days it was harder than normal, and other days it was pretty okay. I recently started to lose my tight grip on my sister after a talk we had about me not letting her be free. I'll rather give her some level of freedom than have her take it by force and hide everything from me. 2 months ago, she told me that she started dating a new boyfriend. I wasn't the happiest because I remember how her last breakup went and I had to clean up the mess. It took her a while to be happy again. It was scary at that time and I was super worried. He had left her without saying anything or giving a concrete reason, just that he didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. So that kept her wondering what went wrong, and she would cry for hours and refuse to eat anything. From that time, I swore that I wouldn't let any man hurt her again if I could prevent it. I was so relieved when she told me that she wasn't going to date for a while because she wanted to clear up her head and her space. Well, that was 1.5 years ago. When she told me about her new boyfriend, I wasn't surprised. I knew something like that was coming because I was observing her and how she took calls, and after them she would keep smiling sheepishly and nothing could ruin her day. There were only a few guesses for me, and my top was that there was a new boy. While I wasn't thrilled, I was happy that her last relationship didn't scare her away from boys. I met the boyfriend a month ago, and he seems cool, though I didn't let myself see him that way, and my guard is super up, so I would notice anything suspicious. I'll call him Kevin. He was a charmer, and somehow got into everyone's good books. He started to even get to me. He has been to our house a couple of times, and we're all getting more comfortable with having him around. I have 2 cars, and one day he asked if he could borrow my car for the weekend because he had to take a quick trip 3 hours away to be back the next day. I was very skeptical, but my sister pleaded with me. She has a way of getting me to do things for her even when I really don't want to. I didn't drive both of them regularly. One was for more special occasions and events, so I wasn't going to let him have my baby. I rode that one to work that day and let him have my regular car. Sis was so happy when I finally agreed, but I gave him some ground rules and told him when he had to be back, and I didn't want stories. He returned the car without any issues, but he was super late. When he came, he seemed tipsy and smelt of alcohol, but it wasn't so much a big deal for me. The next day, I resumed driving my regular car. On my way to work, I remembered that I should have checked my car to make sure that everything was intact. So I decided that I would do that when I got to the office. I was always 20 to 30 minutes early, so I had time. At a glance, everything looks good, but I noticed a black box in the back seat. I opened it, and I could not believe my eyes. It was a gun. I stood there wondering why my sister's 19-year-old boyfriend would have a gun and what he was doing with it. I wasn't sure what to think and how to handle the situation. It was delicate because he is my sister's boyfriend, and I didn't want to come off like I was accusing him of something, but I would need to know why there was a gun in my back seat. I made up my mind to talk about it with my sister once I got home. When I arrived home, my sister wasn't home yet, so I called her to find out where she was and if she would be coming back soon. She told me that she was with her boyfriend. That made me very uncomfortable. What if he was dangerous? I asked myself what I really knew about this boyfriend of hers and what his background was. I told her I needed her to come home and I wanted to discuss something really important with her. She was going to argue, but stopped herself and said okay. Thank God we didn't have to go through that. She got home an hour later and asked what the matter was. I led her to my car and showed her the gun. She was confused and asked me what I was doing with the gun and why I was showing it to her. I told her it wasn't my gun, and I saw it in my back seat this morning when I was looking through the car since I lent it to her boyfriend. She suddenly got what I was trying to say. Her boyfriend left his gun in my trunk. But there were so many unanswered questions that we needed answers as soon as possible. She said it was strange that we would have a gun and he had been acting weird all weekend while he was away, and when she saw him today, he kept looking over his shoulder. There was something fishy here, and we needed to find out what it was before we got into trouble. I told her not to ask him over the phone so he doesn't run away if we need to worry about that. We agreed that she would invite him over tomorrow evening to ask him about the gun. I really hope it is not what I am thinking. I left work early so that I would be home before my sister's boyfriend was supposed to be over at our house. I didn't want to leave both of them alone in the house, knowing that there was a weapon there that could easily be used. If he had a gun, that means he knew how to use a gun. I also have a gun, but it's licensed and only for self-defense, so you wouldn't see it lying around anywhere. When he came in, we went straight to the point. My sister asked Kevin why he had a gun, and he denied it and said he didn't have one, and asked why we would even ask him that. He said he has never handled a real gun in his life, plus he didn't have a license. We took him to my brother's car and asked why he left his gun there. At first, he looked surprised, like he had forgotten about it, and then said it wasn't his. He was obviously lying. I have nothing to pin down on him, and I haven't heard of any crime cases, but now I regret borrowing him my car. Only God knows what he did with it. I just know that he was my sister's boyfriend who goes to school and has a part-time job. I don't know anything personal about him, and it's freaking me out. For all we know, he could be a criminal. I don't know what is going through my sister's mind because she is arguing with him and trying to get him to admit that the gun was his. Because there was no way I would put a gun in my own car and call her to tell her, and he was the only other person who used the car. Did he really take a trip? And if he did, what was the purpose of his trip? I didn't bother to ask him all of that before I foolishly gave him my car. I'm thinking of reporting to the authorities, but I have nothing on him except he left a gun in my car, and with that, I can't prove anything. If my sister doesn't break up with him at this point, I'm going to make her. He didn't admit that the gun was his, and he obviously is lying. I asked my sister how much she knew about him, and everything was very vague. She had never been to his house and didn't even know where he lived. They either came to ours or they went somewhere else. She confessed to me that she felt that there was something shady going on recently, but she didn't know what it was. He had been acting suspicious, and he was always agitated and easily irritated. I told her that none of us was safe with him because we knew next to nothing about him, and with his shady attitude, we may have already put ourselves in danger, and so we need to cut off from him. It was painful for her, and she cried a lot, but she agreed. She apologized to me for putting us through this. I felt horrible for her because her first boyfriend was not it at all, and now this one could be a criminal. She made me promise not to go to the police. I was hesitant and said that she was beginning to fall in love with him, and yes, maybe he was shady and wasn't willing to tell the truth. The consequence was that she broke up with him and cut all ties from him, but she didn't want him to go to jail. She said the police would find him themselves if he did something wrong. I agreed, but I really hope it was the right decision. NTA, please run far away from him as much as you can. If he is weird, borrowed your car to go someplace you don't know, left a gun in it, denies that it is his, then he is not who you think he is. For all you know, he could have set you up. NTA, report him to the police. Your sister is speaking because she loves him, but you don't want to get into more trouble if the police find out something and you get implicated.
Next story.
So, about a year back, my family, me, 17 female, my brother, mom, and dad, got kicked out of our rental home. My parents struggled financially to support all of us and couldn't find an affordable house that suited our needs. So, they came up with a genius solution. They basically started renting a 2-bedroom house and told me in no uncertain terms that I was going to find a family member to take me in. They kicked me out and left me in the front yard with basically nothing but a bag of clothes and my cat. They didn't even help me figure out a living situation. I ended up staying with my disabled aunt for a few weeks, but she couldn't financially support us both, so I had to figure something else out. I ended up venting about this online, and an older friend of mine, Ace 24 NB, privately reached out and offered to let me stay with him. Ace and I had been friends for a little while at this point, and I trusted them. So I said yes. They drove up to my aunt's place and they stayed with us for a few weeks. And then we picked up my things and headed back to Ace's home. I know this seems extremely sketchy, and in most cases it would be, but Ace is chill, and we talk with certain members of my family daily, so they're up to date on literally every bit of drama that goes on in our lives. So no one's really concerned about Ace doing anything. We only live about an hour-ish from my aunt. I'm safe. Please don't call Ace weird or sketchy or anything. They aren't. Anyway, recently one of my cousins got married, and I got invited. I wanted to go, so Ace drove me home and I went to the wedding with a friend. This was the first time since they kicked me out that my parents saw me and they freaked out. My mom grabbed me and started screaming and crying about how worried she was about me, and my dad started yelling at me and demanding where I went. This was in the middle of the reception. I told them that since they kicked me out, I left. A lot of distant families heard this and got pissed off at my parents for kicking a minor out of the house, and others for ruining cousin's wedding. In the chaos, people freaking out and my parents and trying to calm everyone down so the party could continue, I managed to sneak out and go back to Ace. We went home, and ever since, I've been bombarded with calls from my parents and other family telling me to go back and stop hanging out with that pervert. I've been refusing and blocking numbers left and right. Also, my cousin forgave me for what happened at her wedding. She said she enjoyed the drama and having the attention off of her, while her husband solely blamed my parents for what happened. I honestly think my parents don't care about me. If they did, they would have contacted my school before now about me, or the cops, or even my aunt who says that they never ever talked about me when they called her. Either way, AITA for running away, ruining a wedding, and making my parents look like bad people. NTA, you didn't run away. They kicked you out. They made that scene because the family was asking about you at the wedding and they didn't know how to answer. So when you showed up, they saw it as the perfect opportunity to turn it around onto you as running away, to deflect from them kicking you out. They didn't expect you to tell the truth. Their little made-up story to save face didn't quite work out for them.
Next story.
My wife, 32 female, and I, 33 male, got married 2 years ago and moved to a new city late last year for her job. It's a great opportunity to advance her career, so we agreed to move. I work as a radio producer and was able to get a part-time gig at a station in our new city. The new city is a much larger market than we previously lived in, so there are actually more opportunities for me here as well. My wife makes enough to support us right now, and getting a part-time job makes looking for a better job that much easier. Well, at one of our sister stations, a longtime producer suddenly left and they offered me the role in the interim while they searched for replacements. I jumped at the opportunity because I felt if I do well enough, I already have my foot in the door to make it a permanent thing. The only problem is that this job is on a sports talk station and I know pretty much next to zero about sports. I took the interim role about 3 to 4 weeks ago. The first week I couldn't really add much to the show because I didn't watch sports and I don't know much about them. After that week, the host pulled me aside and told me that if I want to be kept on permanently, I need to either learn more about sports or get better at faking it. The problem with that is that this city has all 4 major pro sports and a Division 1 college. That's a lot of content possibilities for our show, with a variety of different sports and hundreds of athletes that I needed to at least halfway familiarize myself with. So I started watching more of the local teams, which means hockey, basketball, and now baseball at the pro level, and also last week the Masters Golf Tournament. I went from watching zero sports to watching at least 2 or 3 hours a day, basically giving myself a crash course on everything I could. This last week, the host of the show complimented me on how much better I'm doing and said if I continue this way, then he will push for me to be kept on permanently. The drawback to this is that my wife also has zero interest in sports and has grown frustrated with me for dedicating so much time in front of the TV. We don't have kids, so our evenings and weekends were usually filled with things we do together, but now I'm doing something that she has no interest in doing. Yesterday was the final round of the Masters, and I knew we would be talking about it today. So I spent a lot of time watching it. My wife got upset with me when I told her I was not going to go on the afternoon walk with her to explore a park in the city. She told me that I'm not spending enough time with her and that she's sick of me spending every night and all weekend on the couch. I told her that this is for my job, and I'm still not knowledgeable enough about sports to fake it well enough to keep this job. I told her that I want to keep this job permanently, and until then, I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. She went on the walk without me and barely spoke to me this morning before she left. I think you both have fair points here, honestly. You're throwing yourself into a new opportunity and you're trying to give yourself every edge you can. She wants to spend time with her husband with mutual interests. I get it. This is something that needs to be solved with conversation between the two of you and not finger-pointing about who is wrong. I will say this, though. Sports media isn't a thing you can just sort of follow and be successful in. You don't have to be an expert on every sport, but you would be expected to be conversant at most of the popular ones. That doesn't slow down. If you don't care for sports, you will burn out. I think you might be better off getting out of the sports beat.